My name is Anna Thompson. I'm 32 years old, a freelance designer who once lived in the city full of ambition and ideas. But life, as it often does, took an unexpected turn. 3 years ago, after my mother passed away from a long illness, I gave up my fast-paced job in Portland and moved back to our family home in a quiet town in Oregon. I didn't think twice. My father was grieving, and I wanted to be there for him. I told myself it would only be temporary. I thought we would find a way to support each other through the pain, and for a while we did. But everything changed the day he remarried. Sabrina, his new wife, was polite and warm in public, the kind of woman who always knew how to smile in front of neighbors and bring a well-baked pie to church picnics. But behind closed doors, she had a different face. She treated me like a stranger invading her territory. And slowly, that house, my mother's house, became a place where I no longer belonged. The day it all came to a head started like any other. I came home from a client meeting late afternoon, sunlight pouring through the windows. Sabrina was standing in the kitchen, arms crossed, lips tight. "There are dishes in the sink," she said sharply. "I'll take care of them later," I replied, already exhausted. "No," she snapped. "You'll do them now. I've already cleaned twice today. This is your mess. I'm not your maid." Before I could respond, my father walked in. His timing, as always, was precise, just in time to misunderstand everything. He looked at the two of us, tension already thick in the air. "What's going on here?" he asked. "She refuses to help around the house," Sabrina said, not missing a beat. My father turned to me with a cold expression I had never seen before. "Anna," he said, "either you respect my wife and do your part, or you can pack your things and leave." It didn't feel like a blow. It felt like silence, like something had finally died. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I smiled. Then I walked past them both up the stairs to my old bedroom and began folding my clothes into a suitcase. I packed slowly and carefully. I took only what I needed: my laptop, my sketchbook, the photo of my mother that used to sit on the living room shelf before Sabrina boxed it away, a few worn novels with notes in the margins, nothing else. As I rolled the suitcase down the stairs, Sabrina stood frozen. My father looked at me confused. He didn't expect me to leave. He expected me to beg. But I wasn't that girl anymore. "I'll see myself out," I said quietly, stepping into the fading light. They didn't follow me. They didn't stop me. And a week later, I had 22 missed calls. The house I left behind wasn't just a building. It was the place where I took my first steps, where my mother used to braid my hair on school mornings, where my father used to lift me onto his shoulders to reach the top shelf of the pantry. Every creak of the floorboards, every chip in the paint, every worn corner of the kitchen table told a story, and most of those stories belonged to my mother. Her name was Linda. She was a high school English teacher, the kind who spent hours writing encouraging notes on her students' essays and made banana bread for the janitor's birthday. She laughed often, even when things were hard. And when she got sick, when cancer started to take her voice, her strength, her body, she never once stopped being kind. I was in the middle of designing a retail campaign in Portland when the call came. She was gone. I came home the next day and never left. My father was shattered. A tall, once proud man who'd spent decades as a local contractor building homes for other people. He suddenly couldn't find his way around his own. He stopped going to his job sites. He stopped talking much at all. For months we lived in silence. I cooked, I cleaned, I filled his prescriptions. I paid the bills when he forgot. When I told him I'd decided to take a break from city life and freelance from home, he didn't argue. He nodded, said thank you, and left it at that. I didn't expect gratitude, but I also didn't expect what came next. Sabrina entered our lives on a Thursday. She was his former legal assistant, someone he'd known through some work permits and inspections. I met her for the first time at my father's birthday dinner, a small gathering at the house. She brought a bottle of wine and a cherry pie, smiling brightly, asking polite questions about my work. I could feel her eyes on the family photos on the walls, on the hand-stitched pillow my mom had made that still sat on the armchair. She moved in 2 months later. At first, I tried to make peace. I gave them space, stayed out of the way. I figured maybe he deserved a second chance at happiness. He'd lost so much. Maybe we both had. But it didn't take long for the balance to shift. She started rearranging the living room without asking. My mother's antique lamp disappeared from the corner table. A week later, her cookbooks vanished from the kitchen shelf. I found them boxed up in the garage, buried under cleaning supplies. When I asked about them, Sabrina said they were collecting dust. I'm just decluttering. My father said nothing. She began treating me like an employee, not family. Could you take care of the laundry while I run errands? Dinner's your turn tonight, right? You didn't vacuum yesterday, it's starting to show. It started as subtle jabs, then became orders. When I pushed back, she'd sigh heavily and say, I'm just trying to make this house run smoothly. I can't do it alone. And then she'd look to my father, who would quietly agree with her. I remember one night, I stayed up late trying to meet a client deadline. I had a Zoom call at 11 p.m. with a buyer in Tokyo. The next morning, she stormed into the kitchen and said the internet bill is in your father's name. He didn't approve overnight use. If you're going to stay here, you should ask before using resources like that. Resources. Like the Wi-Fi was a sacred family heirloom I wasn't entitled to touch. Again, my father said nothing. I started spending more time outside the house, working at cafes, meeting old friends from high school I'd lost touch with, renting co-working space in town once a week just to breathe. But home was still home, or at least it was supposed to be. And then came the moment that broke everything. I had a portfolio review due for a new client, a small magazine in Seattle I was dying to work with. I left my draft sketches on the dining table while I took a walk around the neighborhood. When I returned, the pages were gone. I found them in the trash can, crumpled and soaked with coffee grounds. I stared at them in disbelief, holding the ruined paper in my hands, like something sacred that had been desecrated. When I asked Sabrina if she knew what happened, she shrugged. Oh, those I thought they were scrap paper. They were all over the table. I turned to my father standing beside the sink. Dad, I said those were client work. They were important. He looked at me for a long time, then looked at Sabrina. I don't want arguments in this house, he said. If you can't get along with my wife, maybe you should take some time away. Think about whether living here is still the best idea. And then the line, either respect her and contribute or find somewhere else to go. It didn't come out of nowhere. It had been building. But still, hearing those words broke something inside me. Not because I was being asked to leave, but because he said her, not you. His loyalty was no longer with the daughter who had buried his wife and kept his household running for 2 years. It was with the woman who'd erased my mother's memory one shelf at a time. That night, I packed my bags and walked away from the only home I'd ever known. And still, even then, he didn't stop me. The days leading up to my departure felt like slow suffocation. Every morning I woke up in the same room I'd grown up in, but it no longer felt like mine. The walls were the same color. The furniture hadn't moved, but everything had changed. There was a silence in the house that was no longer peaceful. It was loaded with judgment, with tension, with control. And it wasn't just Sabrina. My father, once gentle and fair, had become something else. Maybe not cruel, but distant, passive. A man who avoided conflict by standing behind whoever shouted loudest. That last week, Sabrina started leaving me notes. Handwritten lists on the fridge. Don't forget to mop the kitchen floor. Groceries are low. Be sure to restock eggs and milk. Please remember to clean the guest bathroom. It's been a week. She wasn't asking. She was assigning. I tried to keep my head down, avoid conflict. I told myself it wasn't worth it, that it would blow over. But something inside me was starting to rebel, to wake up. I wasn't her maid. I wasn't her housekeeper. I was her husband's daughter. And that house had been my mother's long before Sabrina set foot in it. The final straw came on a Thursday. I had just returned from a job interview at a local art studio. It wasn't high-paying, but it was something to get me out of the house and back into the creative space I'd been missing. I was tired, but hopeful. When I walked in, I found Sabrina in the kitchen, standing over a pile of dishes she hadn't touched. "Oh, good," she said, not even turning to look at me. "You're home. You can get started on this. And don't forget to sweep the patio. It's covered in leaves." I set my bag down slowly. "I just got home," I said as calmly as I could. "I know. That's why now is the perfect time. I've been out job hunting all morning." She finally looked at me. And I've been keeping this house in order while you've been out chasing your little art dreams. Something in me snapped. I wasn't loud. I didn't yell. But I didn't hold back either. I'm not your employee, Sabrina. And this isn't just your house. She crossed her arms. You don't pay rent. You don't pay bills. You're a grown woman freeloading in your father's home. I was about to respond when I heard footsteps behind me. My father. He had heard enough to understand what was happening. But instead of addressing her tone or defending me or even offering to mediate, he looked directly at me. Anna, he said, I don't want conflict in this house. Either you respect my wife and do what she asks, or you can find somewhere else to stay. There it was. The line. The ultimatum. A moment I never imagined coming from him. Not after everything I'd done. Not after everything we'd lost together. I wasn't expecting a parade. But I wasn't expecting exile either. I stood there for a moment letting it settle. Then I smiled. Not out of spite, not out of sarcasm. Just release. Okay, I said. Sabrina smirked. Good. I looked at her and shook my head. No, I said. I'll pack. And I turned around, walked up the stairs, and started folding my life into a single suitcase. From the window of my bedroom, I could see the garden my mother had planted. The lavender she loved was gone now, replaced by potted succulents and generic lawn furniture. The wind chime she'd hung by the porch had disappeared too. In a matter of months, Sabrina had erased 25 years of my mother's presence. And my father let her. I zipped up the suitcase, grabbed my laptop, my sketchbooks, and a photo of Mom from the hallway cabinet, the one Sabrina hadn't found yet. I walked downstairs with my bag rolling softly behind me. They were sitting in the living room watching television. Neither of them looked up. I opened the front door. I'll be fine, I said mostly to myself. I always am. Then I left. That night I checked into a small Airbnb near the lake. A one-room cabin with peeling wallpaper and creaky floors, but it was mine. Quiet, peaceful, empty. Not of memories, but of resentment. I lay down, closed my eyes, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Free. The cabin wasn't much to look at. The front porch slanted slightly to one side. The kitchen tiles were cracked. There was a constant hum from the old refrigerator that never quite faded, and the shower took 5 minutes to warm up. But it was mine. For the first time in years, I had a door that no one else could open without knocking. A space where I didn't have to walk on eggshells or explain why I needed silence or justify my career. I paid for the first month up front using the last of a freelance check. Not smart financially, but it bought me time. Time to think, to breathe, to rebuild. On my second morning there, I woke up early and made instant coffee on the rusted stovetop. The air was cool, the lake just outside the window, a quiet sheet of gray-blue. I opened my laptop not to check emails or answer deadlines, but to look at something I hadn't touched in months, my own designs. Old sketches, patterns I'd half finished, a brand identity for a fictional bakery I never pitched. I scrolled through them slowly, letting the creativity settle back in like dust. It had been years since I created something just for myself. I didn't tell anyone where I was. Not yet. I needed the silence. A day later, I checked my phone, 22 missed calls. All from my father. No voicemails, no texts, just call. After call every few hours, like he didn't know what to say, but kept hoping I'd pick up anyway. I didn't. Instead, I logged into the shared online banking account we had set up after my mom died. He wasn't tech-savvy back then, and I'd been the one to pay the bills for a while. My name was still on the account, not because I wanted it to be, but because it had never been changed. It was the same account used to cover things Sabrina couldn't afford on her own. I started making changes. First, I removed my name from the joint savings. Then I updated the security settings and revoked access from the shared household card that I had originally opened under my name to help cover utilities. I canceled the auto payment I'd been sending monthly for their water and trash bills. I also reached out to our family lawyer, the one who handled my mom's estate, and asked for a review of the will. Not to contest anything, but to make sure no new paperwork had been submitted. Just a precaution. The lawyer confirmed something odd 2 weeks ago. Someone had inquired about updating property rights for the house, asked whether my mother's name had ever been officially removed from the deed. The inquiry came from Sabrina's email. It didn't surprise me. I filed the paperwork to separate all remaining financial connections between us, quietly, legally, thoroughly. The same way Sabrina had erased my mother's belongings, I was now erasing myself from their world, a world I once thought was mine. That weekend, I bought groceries with my own card, picked up a secondhand coffee table from a yard sale, and placed my mother's photo by the window where the sunlight hit it in the morning. I worked late into the night on a new design project, something for a local bookstore that needed a rebrand. The owner was an older woman named Darlene, who ran the shop by herself and still filed receipts in a shoebox. She didn't care where I lived, what I looked like, or who I had walked away from. She just cared that I understood what her business meant to her. The work was steady, not life-changing, but healing. Every now and then I'd check my phone. Still no voicemails, still no texts. But the missed calls continued. At first, they felt like noise, but over time, they started to feel like echoes, not of apology, but of confusion, of someone finally realizing what they had allowed to happen. I never blocked his number. I wanted him to know I was still here, just not waiting anymore. One morning, a text came in. "Are you safe?" That was all. No apology, no explanation, just 3 words. I didn't answer. But I did sip my coffee slowly, watching the light pour in through the pine trees. Because I was. I was safe, for the first time in a long time, and I didn't need permission anymore to protect my peace. It's strange how much power can hide in quiet decisions. Not grand gestures, not confrontations or shouted truths, but forms, filled out phone calls made permissions revoked. The slow, steady unraveling of a life I no longer owed them. For years, I had been helping my father financially, emotionally, practically. After Mom passed, he was lost in every way that mattered. He forgot due dates, lost track of bills, didn't know how to access his own retirement funds. I stepped in without thinking. He didn't ask, but he also didn't stop me. It started with simple things. I'd check his bank statements once a week. I automated his bill payments. He handed over power of attorney for convenience, so I could sign paperwork while he focused on recovering. I became the guardian of our home's stability. I didn't feel burdened by it. At the time, it felt like love. Then Sabrina entered the picture. She brought her own bills, her own expectations, her own version of what a household should look like. And slowly, quietly, my father's accounts began reflecting that. New insurance policies, subscription services, a landscaping company to replace the neighborhood boy who used to mow the lawn, cosmetic upgrades to the bathroom that looked suspiciously like luxury purchases. I noticed the pattern early. I knew how to read statements. I'd worked in design and branding for years, but numbers were something I understood intuitively. I saw the shift, but I said nothing. I didn't want to seem petty. I told myself if it made him happy, who was I to interfere? But happiness wasn't what was growing. Control was. Sabrina used my name when setting up their new home internet account. She listed my number on credit forms. Once I discovered she'd added herself as an authorized user on a store card I'd opened to furnish the guest room. For when my cousin came to visit, I never approved that. I never even knew until I received the statement. The last 6 months before I left, I was paying nearly $700 a month in silent contributions, and I hadn't lived a full life of my own since I returned. The worst part, I thought I was being noble. After I left the house, I sat in that lakeside cabin with my laptop open and a spreadsheet in front of me. It was filled with entries, auto-drafted utility bills, shared account charges, overlapping insurance premiums. I sorted them by date, by category, by who truly benefited. And then I made calls. I called the energy company and took my name off the household account. They tried to offer discounts if I stayed on as a cosigner. I politely declined. I called the water company and asked for my card to be removed as the auto payment source. Done in 2 minutes. I called the bank and changed the security access to the joint account that had been linked to my father's card. Then I removed my name entirely. I contacted my personal insurance agent and explained that a secondary member had been added to my umbrella coverage without my consent. Sabrina had piggybacked on my policy under the guise of family coverage. That ended with a single email. Next came the store card. I asked to remove her as an authorized user. The rep told me she had made purchases 2 days before I left. Candles, a set of expensive bed sheets, a $600 espresso machine. The bill had posted under my name. I paid it off that night. Then I closed the card. Each action felt like a stitch being removed from a wound I didn't know I had. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. Anger is hot and immediate. This was colder, deeper, the kind of pain you don't realize you've been carrying until you put it down and suddenly feel weightless. I filed a report with the credit bureaus flagging the accounts that had included fraudulent activity, not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed to be clean. No loose threads. Lastly, I called our family attorney. I had helped him revise my mom's will years earlier, back when we thought she'd pull through. He remembered me instantly. "I need to talk to you about the house," I said. There was a pause on the other end. "I was about to call you," he said. Something unusual came up. A few weeks prior, he'd received a request from Sabrina submitted through a digital form inquiring about my mother's original will. She asked whether there were any remaining legal claims from Linda Thompson's estate that might affect the current property deed. She claimed to be updating documentation for household restructuring. He hadn't replied yet. Something about the tone bothered him. "She was trying to check if she could change the deed without your involvement," he said. "Possibly to add her name as co-owner." The deed was still in my father's name, but my mother had left a clause in her will that gave me survivorship rights. It wasn't common, but she'd insisted on it, just in case. She always planned for just in case, and now just in case had come. The attorney advised me to place a temporary freeze on the property paperwork. He could issue a notice that no changes could be made without my written consent. I agreed immediately. Then I took it one step further. I told him I wanted to transfer my rights into a living trust, not to block my father, but to prevent any further manipulation from people who had no claim to the home. I didn't want the house, but I didn't want it stolen either. That weekend I completed the paperwork, signed, notarized, and sealed. By Sunday morning, the financial umbilical cord had been cut completely. It wasn't about money. It was about value, about reclaiming mine. And the most ironic part, not once in all those 22 missed calls did he mention money. Not in texts, not in emails. Because money was never the problem. Respect was. And now, with each transaction reversed, each string severed, I felt more whole than I had in years. That night, I bought a small wooden desk from a secondhand shop down the road and set it up by the cabin window. I lit a candle. I opened a fresh notebook, and I wrote my name in ink as though it belonged there. Anna Thompson, whole, free, no longer a silent participant in someone else's comfort. I didn't have a plan, not yet, but I had something better. I had control. I thought I was done. After cutting the financial ties, filing the necessary paperwork, and freezing the deed, I believed the damage had been contained, that Sabrina's reach had ended where my signature was no longer required. But the truth, as it often does, found its way to the surface, and it came from a most unexpected place. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and I was at the local print shop in town having business cards made for a new freelance client. The owner, Harold, an old friend of my parents, looked up as he handed me the proof. "Funny thing," he said, tapping the counter. "Your stepmother was in here a couple of weeks ago." I looked up. "Sabrina." "Yeah. She was asking about letterhead printing, something for your dad's contracting business. Said she was helping him modernize things." That didn't sound like her. Sabrina had never shown interest in his business. She barely knew the difference between shingles and siding. "What did she want printed?" He pulled out a sample and slid it across the counter. "Thompson and Kodu, General Contracting Sole Owner, Sabrina L. Thompson." My stomach dropped. There was no Thompson & Co. My father had always worked under his own name, Charles Thompson Construction. He never incorporated, never changed it. "And get this," Harold added, "she asked if we had a notary on staff. Wanted to know if we could notarize a transfer of ownership document. Said you had already signed it electronically." I froze. I didn't sign anything. Harold frowned. "That's what I figured. Your dad didn't seem the type to just hand things over." Neither did I. That night I called my family attorney again. This time I didn't ask. I demanded a search. We combed through county property records, title office submissions, and any recent filings under my name or my father's. Then we found it. A forged quitclaim deed, a legal document that, if validated, would have transferred partial ownership of the house and business to Sabrina. The signature on the form was mine. It had even been notarized, but not by anyone who had ever seen me sign anything in their life. They had faked it. The address listed was correct. The signature, though a poor imitation, passed at a glance. The date aligned with the week I left the house. She had tried to make it look like I'd signed my rights away on the way out the door. I sat there holding the digital printout and shaking hands. She hadn't just wanted me gone. She wanted what I'd protected. The home, the business, the identity of a family that was never hers to take. My attorney filed a fraud complaint with the county. We requested an immediate review of all associated documents and began compiling evidence to nullify the forged deed. I reached out to a contact at the title office, a woman named Leona, whose daughter I had mentored in a high school design program. Leona called me that night. Anna, she was in here. I remember her now. She came alone and dropped off the document, said she was handling things on behalf of the family. She paused. I didn't think much of it at the time. But now, something felt off. She was nervous, kept glancing at the door. I felt like I couldn't breathe. She was trying to erase me, I whispered. Leona's voice softened. You stopped her just in time. But the question still lingered. How far had she planned to go? I got part of the answer the next day. I received a voicemail from one of my father's old subcontractors, Tom Delgado. I hadn't heard from him in years. Hey, Anna, this is Tom. Not sure if you're still in town, but I got a weird call from Sabrina asking about estimates on converting the house into a duplex. Said they were prepping for a remodel and needed a second income stream. Just thought I'd run it by you in case something's off. It was all coming together now. She wasn't just hoping to take the house. She was planning to profit from it. Turn my mother's home into a rental property run under a business she controlled and financed through a deed that wasn't legally hers. It wasn't personal to her. Not the memories, not the family, not the grief. It was business. I called the title office, and the attorney that night asked them to expedite all revocation procedures. They agreed, and within 72 hours, the forged deed was voided and flagged for review by the district clerk. That gave me legal standing. But emotionally, I felt gutted. My mother had died in that house. I had poured myself into keeping that space alive, thinking I was preserving something for all of us. I thought I was being the bridge. Instead, I had become the target. That weekend, I drove by the house for the first time since I left. I parked across the street far enough to avoid notice. There were new potted plants on the porch, wind chimes that weren't my mother's, a wreath on the door with a giant gold T in the center, as if the name alone gave her claim. The house looked the same from a distance, but I no longer recognized it. That was the moment I made my final decision. I wouldn't fight for the house anymore, but I would fight for what it stood for. It wasn't just a building, it was a legacy, and she would not be the one to inherit it. The next move had to be strategic, not emotional. Sabrina had operated in silence, behind signatures, behind closed doors, behind my father's passivity. But I knew something she didn't. Small towns don't stay silent forever. They whisper. They compare. They remember. And when the right story breaks through the noise, everyone listens. I started with the people who knew me not through blood, but through years. Mrs. Langley, my high school art teacher, now ran the town library's community board. I dropped off a new flyer for my freelance services with a personal note attached. She called me an hour later. Anna, dear, we've all been wondering what happened. There were rumors, but we didn't believe them. Which ones? I asked carefully. That you ran off without a word, that you left your poor father and stepmother in financial ruin. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked for 5 minutes at the next town council meeting, the kind held at the community center every third Thursday, where old men debated the best method of leaf removal and retirees shared pie recipes. The kind of place where stories took root and never left. She agreed. When I arrived that evening, I wore jeans and a black sweater. No drama, no makeup, just clarity. I stood in front of about 30 people, most of whom had known my mother attended her funeral and brought casseroles after she died. My name is Anna Thompson. I began. Many of you knew my mother, Linda. She taught your children, helped organize your book drives, and probably corrected your grammar without meaning to. A soft wave of knowing chuckles filled the room. When she passed away, I came home. I gave up my job in the city to be here for my father, for this house, for this town. I paused. But last month I left. Not because I wanted to. Not because of selfishness or resentment. I left because I was told I had to choose between serving my father's new wife or leaving the home I helped him hold together. The room went still. In the weeks since I've discovered documents forged in my name, attempts to take over family property and false stories spread to make me seem unstable, irresponsible, ungrateful. I let that settle. My mother left behind a legacy, not money, not things, but a home filled with meaning and the belief that honesty matters more than comfort. So here I am, telling the truth, not because I want revenge, but because I refuse to let silence tell the story for me. When I finished, no one clapped. They nodded. The kind of nods that meant we hear you, we know now we'll remember. The next morning, I walked into Millie's Diner, the unofficial heart of town gossip, and was greeted by half a dozen familiar faces. Anna Tom, the hardware store owner, called, waving me over. Heard you spoke last night. People needed to hear that. I didn't want to, I admitted. Millie poured my coffee and leaned in. Well, maybe you didn't, but it's about time someone told the truth. By noon, the whispers started shifting direction. That week, I drafted a letter to the town paper, a short editorial piece titled, Inheritance Isn't Ownership. I didn't name names. I didn't accuse. I just described the difference between caretaking and entitlement. It ended with this. My mother built a home filled with love. I only wish the people who live in it now understood the cost of what they've tried to claim. The editor published it in the Sunday edition. Front page, bottom corner. It spread faster than I expected. A few days later, I got a call from Pastor Grant at St. Matthew's, the church my family had attended for 20 years. I think it's time we talked, he said. People are asking questions. They deserve answers. So I met him. We sat in the back of the sanctuary, light filtering in through the old stained glass windows. He didn't press. He just listened. When I was finished, he folded his hands. You know, he said, I visited your father last week. He looked tired, like someone who realizes too late that they made a mistake but doesn't know how to fix it. Did he ask about me? I asked. No, but he didn't have to. I stood to leave, and he added gently, forgiveness doesn't always mean return. Sometimes it just means freedom. That Sunday after the service, I lingered outside the church while others filed out. People approached quietly. A neighbor who had watched me grow up brought me a bag of fresh apples. An old classmate asked if I could help redesign her shop logo. Even Mrs. Henderson, who had always loved my father and barely tolerated me, took my hand and whispered I didn't know. I'm sorry. Sabrina didn't come to church that week. My father did. He looked thinner, grayer. He passed me on the front steps, slowed, but didn't speak. It didn't matter. He had seen what I needed him to see. Not rebellion, not revenge, but strength. The kind he had forgotten I was capable of, and the kind he couldn't take credit for. The call started the night after the letter to the newspaper ran. I was making tea in the cabin, folding laundry on the couch when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Dad. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, he called again, then again. By the time I went to bed, I had missed 5 calls. No messages. The next morning, 3 more. By the end of the week, 22. I didn't answer any of them. Not out of spite, not out of vengeance. I just wasn't ready. I didn't want to hear excuses. I didn't want silence on the other end. And I especially didn't want a voice that sounded sorry, only because the town had finally found out. But curiosity, or maybe habit, got the better of me on Saturday afternoon. I sat by the window, phone in hand, and opened the voicemail folder. Only 2 messages had come through. The first was quiet. Almost too quiet. Anna, it's me. Just wanted to hear your voice. I don't really know what to say. Long pause. I miss you. He hung up. The second message came a day later. I read your letter. The one in the paper. Your mother she would have said you're brave. That's what she always said about you. Another pause. I didn't protect what mattered. I see that now. Then softly, like it hurt to admit it, I didn't protect you. I pressed my thumb against the delete button, then stopped. I saved it instead. That evening, I got a text. Can we meet just the two of us, please? I didn't reply right away. I took a walk along the lake, the October air sharp but clean. Leaves rustled underfoot. My breath fogged in front of me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was living in a world that didn't expect anything from me. Not my money, not my forgiveness, just my presence. But the question tugged at me. Was I ready to be in the same room as him again? This wasn't just about what he said that night. Either serve my wife or leave. It was about everything after. How he let her strip my mother's memory from the walls, one picture frame at a time. How he stood by while my belongings were trashed, my designs discarded like they meant nothing. How he let her weaponize silence and he joined in. And now, after the paper, after the council meeting, after the neighbors' eyes turned toward them, now he wanted to talk. Still, a small part of me remembered. I remembered how he used to hum when mowing the lawn, how he made up bedtime stories when I was little, full of magical cats and invisible bicycles, how he sobbed alone in the laundry room the night Mom died, thinking I couldn't hear him. The man I remembered was still somewhere under the damage, maybe. So I texted back, one meeting, in public. No Sabrina, no pressure. His reply came seconds later. Name the time and place. I chose the little bookstore cafe in town, the one Mom used to visit on Sunday afternoons. They served mediocre coffee and warm cinnamon bread, and the chairs always wobbled just a bit. He arrived 10 minutes early, already sitting when I walked in. Same old coat, new wear on his face. When I sat down, he didn't speak right away, just looked at me like I was both familiar and foreign. Finally, he said, "You look like her." I said nothing. He reached into his coat pocket and placed something on the table. A photo, the one of Mom holding me in her lap on my 3rd birthday. I found this in the drawer. I thought she'd want you to have it. I took it, slipped it into my notebook. Not ready to hold it. Not yet. I'm sorry, he said, for all of it, for not stopping her, for not seeing what was happening, for not standing beside you when you needed me to. I stared at him. You didn't just choose her, I said. You chose comfort. You chose not to notice. That hurt more than anything. He nodded. I know. Silence fell between us like snowfall. Not heavy, just quiet. I'm not asking to fix everything he said. I'm asking if it's possible to start again. As people, not as father and daughter, just as two people trying not to lose what little they still have. That surprised me. Not the apology, but the humility. And maybe that was a start. I picked up my tea. No promises, I said. This won't be quick. And it won't be easy. He nodded. I'll earn it, he said. And for the first time in months, I believed him. I didn't go back to the house, even after our meeting at the cafe, even after my father reached out a few more times with updates, reflections, questions, always careful, never pressuring. I still couldn't bring myself to step through that door again. Some places hold too much of the wrong kind of weight. And this one, it wasn't just the betrayal. It was the slow erasure, the steady peeling away of memory. What was once my mother's sanctuary had been converted into something else, something colder, more transactional. The soul was gone, and I didn't want to be there to try and find it. But I knew I had to make a final decision, and not just about forgiveness, but about legacy. My name still carried legal leverage over the property. The forged quitclaim deed had been fully revoked and flagged. The county clerk had finalized the invalidation. Sabrina had gone quiet after that. Not a word, not a letter, not a challenge. My father had moved out a few weeks after that. He said it no longer felt like his home either. She changed the walls, he told me, but I let her change the air. He was renting a small apartment downtown now near the senior center and the park. He brought up going to grief counseling once or twice. He didn't ask me to attend. He said he'd go because he wanted to figure out how to be alone with himself, and maybe how to be a better version of the man I remembered. But the house, It was still in my name by right, still mine to decide what to do with. For a while I thought I'd sell it, let the whole thing go, wash my hands of the space entirely, and use the money to start fresh somewhere else. But every time I came close to calling a real estate agent, I'd see my mother's handwriting in the margins of a book. I'd hear her laugh as she planted lavender outside the kitchen window. I'd remember her whispering that it wasn't the structure that made a home, it was the care. I wasn't going to live there again. But maybe someone else could. Someone who understood what it meant to lose, to rebuild, to live with dignity. That's when I reached out to the Montana Women's Art and Healing Initiative, a small nonprofit I'd read about in an old grant report. They offered housing and creative programs for women in recovery from abuse, from grief, from addiction, from isolation. I emailed them, told them about the house, the history, the size. I explained I wasn't looking to sell, but to donate with one condition. It had to be used as a communal art space and transitional housing for women starting over. They called me 2 days later. A woman named Carla spoke through tears. "No one ever just offers something like that," she said. "Especially not something so personal." But that was the point. It was personal. It always had been. I flew out a week later to meet with their boardwalk through the logistics, sign the papers. My attorney handled the legal process, transferring the title into the nonprofit's name. No money exchanged, just mission. They planned to convert the house into a 3-unit dwelling, shared kitchen, shared studio, private bedrooms, a garden out back. The lavender would be replanted. That was non-negotiable. On the day the work crew came in, I visited once. The walls were stripped bare, the old carpet pulled up, every trace of Sabrina's decor had been removed. A fresh start. I stood in the doorway of my old bedroom and thought of all the nights I'd laid there wondering if I'd made a mistake coming home, wondering if staying had been weak or strong, if love always meant sacrifice. Now I saw it more clearly. Love meant boundaries, and sometimes the deepest form of care was in letting go intentionally, gracefully, and for the right reasons. As I left, Carla hugged me at the curb. "This house is going to save people," she said. "You've turned something painful into something healing." I nodded, but I didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. A week later, I received a photo in my inbox. The front porch had been painted. The lavender was in bloom. 3 women stood on the steps smiling, one holding a paintbrush, one holding a baby, one holding a sketch pad. Under the photo was a short caption, "Welcome home." I cried. Not the kind of sobbing I'd done after Mom died. Not the hollow kind I'd felt when I packed my suitcase and left without a goodbye. These were tears that rinsed, that washed away the dust, that made space for the next chapter, the house we couldn't keep. It was finally being lived in by people who needed it, people who would never take it for granted. And that felt like justice. 3 months passed. The cabin by the lake became more than a temporary refuge. It became home. Not forever, maybe, but enough. Enough to remind me who I was before I started measuring my worth in obedient silence and approval. I had work again, steady, fulfilling work. I took on branding projects for small businesses, designed wedding invitations for women who wanted something elegant and personal, even sketched murals for the town library's children's room. Nothing flashy, nothing loud, but all of it mine. I found a rhythm: morning walks, strong coffee, design hours at the desk by the window, evenings with a book or a quiet call with someone who didn't demand anything from me. The quiet didn't feel empty anymore. Then one afternoon my phone buzzed, a text from an unfamiliar number. But I knew who it was before I even opened it. "Dad, hey, just wondering if maybe coffee sometime. No pressure, just a conversation." I stared at it for a long time. He'd respected the space I asked for. No sudden drop-ins, no guilt-laced voicemails, just a few texts now and then. Careful, simple. This one was different, though. It wasn't him trying to explain the past. It was an invitation to start something new. I typed back, "Anna, Saturday morning, diner by the library, 9 a.m. His response came within a minute. "Dad, I'll be there." Saturday arrived bright and cold. I chose the same booth my mother used to sit in by the window, where the sun always hit the table just right. He walked in exactly at 9, older, slower, but somehow smaller too, like the silence had humbled him. We didn't hug, just nodded, sat, ordered coffee. He stirred his for too long before speaking. "I didn't think you'd say yes," he said finally. "I didn't either," I replied. That made him smile. A small one. Honest. "I've been going to a grief group," he said, "at the senior center. Thought it was too late for that, but turns out there's still things I never faced." I'm glad I said. He took out an envelope and slid it across the table. "Divorce papers," he said. "Signed, filed, she's gone." I didn't touch the envelope. "You didn't have to show me that," I said. "I know," he said. "I just wanted you to see I'm not trying to fix things by erasing them. Just trying to show you I understand now." I nodded. We sipped our coffee. I read about the house, he added. The art program. The women moving in. "They deserve it," I said simply. "She would have been proud of that," he said. We both knew who he meant. We sat in silence a while longer. Not the tense kind we used to have where unspoken words filled the air like dust. This was different, soft, earned. After a while, he said, "I don't expect us to go back to how things were." "Good," I said, "because we won't." He chuckled a little, then grew quiet again. "But I'd like to get to know the woman you've become," he said, not as a father who thinks he already knows everything, just as someone who'd like the chance. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in years I saw a man who wasn't hiding behind authority or pride or someone else's voice. He was just trying. "I don't promise forgiveness," I said. "Not all at once, not forever. I don't ask for it," he replied. "I'll earn what I can. One cup of coffee at a time." We finished breakfast. He walked me to the car but didn't try to hug me. As I opened the door, he said, "You're not the same girl I raised." "No," I said, "but I'm the woman Mom hoped I'd be." He blinked hard, looked down, then nodded. "See you next week." Maybe I said getting into the car. We'll see. I drove back to the cabin windows, down sunlight on my hands. My phone buzzed once, an email confirmation from the nonprofit. The final phase of renovations had begun. The house would open to its first group of residents in 3 weeks. 3 women, each with a story they hadn't finished writing. Just like me. Later that evening, I got another message. This time from the program director. "Carla, we'd love to have you teach a weekly creative workshop, no pressure. They could really use someone like you." I looked around my small cabin, my sketchbooks, my quiet freedom, and I typed back, "Anna, I'll be there." Because sometimes healing doesn't come from going back. It comes from giving forward, from telling the truth, from walking away when you need to, and from returning not to what was, but to what's possible. One honest action at a time.